Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. Time to start it all over again. And, I needed someone bring me a glass of water because I feel like I need to take crazy pills. I mean, I must be taking crazy pills already, right? I must be taking them daily as a dosage, and I must have missed my dosage today. I don't know. We got a long way to go to the end of this administration if it comes to a natural conclusion, let us say. But it will be a while. It'll take us a little bit of time. And I count the days down, 1,159 with today included. So, like I said, we got a ways to go. It's about 350 days until we see whether there's, like a free and fair election and we have an opportunity to, let's say, put a lid on this thing for the last 2 years, as historically people have been able to do when they get out of whack and out of balance with their president. But what is it today that makes me think things are off balance? Well, golly, there's so much. First of all, by the way, I guess there's some sort of internet explosion or something has happened, and my the deck readers for my usual social media go-tos are down, and I don't know whether is the web-based app okay on it. I guess so. So I guess I could read it that way. But for whatever reason, the cloud thingy that's feeding my usual deck readers is out. Cloudflare, for whatever reason. And apparently people are sharing all this. But that's not what's making me think we're taking crazy pills. I'll go over to Instapaper for that. I think probably tops of the list. Boy, what a day. But tops on the list came through my morning email from the failing New York Times, I guess. I'll adopt that posture. Why not? At this point, like I said, I think we're all taking crazy pills. Maybe he's right and we're all nuts. Among the items in their morning news roundup, I guess I was struck by this headline, and let me open it up so I can read it to you in full. In major breakthrough, all right, not so great already. It's the Trump administration. UN Security Council adopts U.S. peace plan for Gaza. I don't know what I expected to happen, I guess. I thought, well, it's been a while, and there wasn't any real reaction to it. I guess I thought the UN would say, no, you can't bulldoze the rubble of Gaza and move all the Palestinians out and build luxury hotels and never let them back in again. That's definitely not in keeping with the UN Security Council thinking. But this morning I found out, oh, yes, it is, actually. Although, and here, too, I'm not sure whether, what do we think here? Did the UN Security Council get a document that said, well, we're going to build it beautiful and build just a bunch of Trump towers, but let the Palestinians have them for free? Would you approve that plan? I mean, even if they presented that plan, do you think I guess, what can I tell you? It's all my illusions are falling apart, which I guess maybe in the end is a good thing. To have a better, more clear-eyed view of the world, I suppose, if I can get that out of this. I'm not sure. But, back when I was a kid, I keep telling you about this. It was like a psychology a session. I'm going to lie on the couch. When I was a kid, I believed that if you had a disagreement with what Congress was doing and you just said, I'm just going to run up in there, I'm going to smash the doors down, I'm going to bring everybody with me, and we're going to go in there and I'm going to beat those congressmen up, that would not work. I was pretty sure that would not work. Furthermore, I was pretty sure you would get arrested or shot, and maybe both. Maybe not both at once. Maybe a delayed reaction. I don't know. But as it turns out, no, it's not true. It's a super patriotic thing to do, and you'll be pardoned by the president. I didn't, as a kid, I probably wouldn't have seen that coming. Likewise, I guess I thought the UN Security Council, they would sit down and they would say, is this workable? Is this realistic? Can we make this happen? This is world peace we're talking about here. What do you think? No, that's, if you come to them with an insane plan that has nothing to do with anything, none of the problems, they would say, no, actually, that's an interesting plan, but you're going to have to go it alone on this one. Or, get whatever partners you want. But the UN Security Council isn't going to help you bulldoze Gaza, rebuild it as gold spray painted, luxury apartments, sell them to Russians, and, throw the Palestinians into the ocean. No, we vote against that. Well, they didn't. Although I guess I do remember one thing from a kid. When I was in 6th grade, we did a study on the United Nations. It was a fixture in the 6th grade social studies class. I actually was waiting all that time, and I was interested in it. Say 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, when I became aware of the fact that they did this, I thought, this is exciting. I'd like to go. I want to. When I get to 6th grade, I want to study this unit. They take a trip each year to the UN building. I lived in New Jersey, so it wasn't, that far away. We didn't go to Geneva, went to United Nations headquarters in New York. And as luck would have it, because I'm such a lucky fellow, our scheduled trip to the United Nations fell right in the middle of the Iranian hostage crisis. And the school said, you know what? And I guess the initial stages of it. We're not going. We're not going to the UN. It's a little raucous over there. There's demonstrations going on. We're not going to go. So, I don't know. For all I know, generations, I guess it wasn't generations yet, but many, many years of kids had lucked out and gone on the UN field trip in 6th grade and then afterwards as well, but not me. Anyway, our assignment was we had to do a report on the UN, and I had to call the UN and ask them, this is how you found these things out. I don't know whether this was the suggested methodology, but my task was to find out who is the Secretary General of the United Nations. And it occurs to me now, I don't remember how it came to this, but I mean, I guess I could have gone to the library. We didn't have the internet then. But my choice was to go to the school office and say, I'd like to use the telephone. And they sat me down in the nurse's office and gave me the desk phone there. And I called information, and then I called the United Nations. You think this is funny, do you? I don't know if I ever told this story. Certainly not on the air. I called the United Nations. I got a question. I'm in 6th grade. I'm doing an assignment. I got to find out who is the Secretary General of the United Nations. Will you tell me who is the Secretary General? I don't know. It didn't hit me the same way, but now, to my dismay, I found out that the Secretary General of the United Nations at the time was Kurt Waldheim. All right. Well, whoops. Anyway, that was a letdown, but not at the time. I didn't know how much of a letdown it was. All right, so I wrote it down and I went back. But I'm thinking now about whether or not my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Galanti, all right, West Orange, New Jersey, in case you're listening, sir. My question now is, was that the assignment? Call the United Nations, contact the United Nations and find out? Equally plausible, by the way, this is not the news story. Equally plausible, the assignment was to make some kind of direct contact and get the information directly. I don't know why that would be the case. Like, why not go to the library? But get a newspaper, something like that. I may have been asked to write to the United Nations. This is entirely possible that I was asked to write to the United Nations and I was given 2 weeks to do it and I didn't do it. And so I called. I don't know. But I don't think that was it either. Honestly, if the situation was to write, I probably would have done it. I think in 4th grade, I wrote to, by the way, 4th grade, I wrote to Queen Elizabeth. I was a very precocious youth. 4th grade, I wrote to Queen Elizabeth of the United Kingdom, in case you were wondering which one. I believe we were collecting famous people's autographs was the assignment. And you had to write to people and collect autographs. And I decided to write to the Queen of England. And I wrote and I got an answer. I wish I saved the thing. I got an answer from a lady in waiting. That's for the first time I discovered that there were such things. Saying, yeah, the Queen doesn't give out her signature. I guess the Queen's signature, by the way, bears some legal significance. So she can't just sign anything. Or I don't know. She wasn't doing autographs that day. And I got a nice card back and it counted for the assignment. And I think there the assignment both in fourth grade and sixth grade was mixed lessons. One, not only educational lessons, but also life lessons, how to, contact things and people and places and get information that way and live a life. Like right now, the kids would have no idea what to do. First, they'd go to the internet. It wouldn't make any difference. Or AI would tell them who the Secretary General is. It might be wrong, but the idea of them calling the United Nations seems outlandish now. But although, honestly, the idea of me calling the United Nations, hello, who is your Secretary General, seems outlandish too. Anyway, a couple of Secretaries General later, we find ourselves in this situation. In major breakthrough, UN Security Council adopts U.S. peace plan for Gaza. How could this be? The subheader tells me that was the wake-up call. This is crazy. How could they possibly approve this thing? The subheader says, Russia and China abstained in the vote, which is interesting, which provides a legal mandate for the Trump administration's vision, believe it or not, and I don't know which vision they described to them, their vision of how to move past the ceasefire, i.e. move all the Palestinians out, to rebuild the war-ravaged enclave after 2 years of war. And I guess it then dawned on me, like, all right, we're in this situation. Russia and China probably would abstain at this point, which means I remember my unit on the UN from sixth grade of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, really something we should probably re-examine at this point. They all have a veto. And if Russia abstains because they're like, yeah, absolutely want to see the United States get bogged down and pour resources into this mess. And fantastic if it's Trump personally. China, I guess, just says, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Let's let that happen. And that leaves us, and we're not going to veto it. Unless the United Nations wrote to Jeffrey Epstein at some point. Or Britain or France. Now, I don't know why neither of them did it either, but they're all got their own problems. I don't know. So none of the permanent members did. I don't know who else is on the Security Council at the moment, the rotating countries. I guess everybody was sort of like, let's just get out of the United States' way of screwing this up, I guess. Or what does it matter if we say no, he's going to do it anyway, and then what are we going to do? I don't know what the thinking was. But it certainly wasn't, no, you can't do this. This isn't anything like a peace plan. And it will be embarrassing to us to say it is. And I don't know. I mean, my first guess is maybe it's not. My second guess is absolutely it is, and they don't care for some reason, and that's weird. All right, Farnaz Fasihi. I'm sure I'm ruining the pronunciation of our author's name, but she has covered the United Nations for 10 years under 4 different U.S. administrations. I don't know how many secretaries general that is. But here's the news. The United Nations Security Council on Monday approved President Trump's peace plan. Oh, my God. For Gaza. A breakthrough that provides a legal UN mandate for the administration's vision of how to move past the ceasefire and rebuild the war-ravaged Gaza Strip after 2 years of war. And I don't know whether that's just a gloss that she's putting on it, because I guess it ultimately does, in fact, mean that, or whether they said that. But I'm sitting here, like I said, first thing in the morning, I think I'm taking crazy pills. So I went back to when I started taking crazy pills in 4th grade and told you my life's history on that one. But what am I hearing? A legal UN mandate for Trump's, gold brickification of the Gaza Strip? That's nuts. How could you do this? There's several countries in this United Nations. Well, anyway, the Council's vote was also a major diplomatic victory for the Trump administration, also difficult to digest. For the past 2 years, as the conflict between Israel and Hamas has raged, the United States has been isolated at the UN over its staunch support for Israel. Does it look isolated at the UN now? It does not. It looks endorsed by the UN. How the effing F does that happen? The U.S. resolution calls for an international stabilization force, and those have capital letters. That's what they're going to call it, I guess, ISF. Or maybe they'll call it something else, but that's it. An international stabilization force to enter, demilitarize, and govern Gaza. That was part of the crazy plan. I heard about that first, and these guys said, okay, the proposal, which contained Mr. Trump's 20-point ceasefire plan, which, others have said, well, that's actually somebody else's ceasefire plan, but okay, it's got points in it. That's a plan. Also envisions, and I guess this is the new part, the Board of Peace. I can't believe they allowed that name to go through. We got to come up with something else for this. The Board of Peace to oversee the plan, though it does not clarify the composition of the board. But you know what Trump's vision for Gaza is, that he's the chair of the Board of Peace. So I don't know whether they are quietly trying to say we approve all the rest of the plan, but not Trump as the chairman, or whether they're just saying we didn't read this. I don't know. AI summarized it for me, and I just figured it must be wrong, and then I ran out of time, and I had to vote. I don't know. The resolution passed with 13 votes in favor and 0 votes against. China and Russia, either of which could have vetoed it, abstained, apparently swayed by the support for the resolution from a number of Arab and Muslim nations. I guess they said that if they're okay with it, then we're okay with it, but I don't know. Well, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudish Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, all understandable just in terms of like, well, I'll get a piece of this investment. But also Indonesia, which is, of course, I think the largest Muslim population in the world. So an important backing, but not a Middle Eastern nation, but also now makes me think, I mean, there are a lot of other very large Muslim countries that I guess haven't expressed support or whatever, or maybe they've been neutral or something. But they're not. It's a weird pattern, right? Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudish Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, basically the usual players with either enormous amounts of sovereign wealth or actual sovereigns, hereditary monarchies. Indonesia, though, is an interesting addition. And then I was reminded, where was Trump not that long ago? Oh, right, the ASEAN conference. And he was pulled aside by the Indonesian president, and there was the hot mic moment where the Indonesian president told him that, I don't know, what was his fondest wish or whatever, but he was very excited about the possibility of meeting Eric Trump, which is, well, that's just suspect right there. At that point, we're investigating you. Well, except we're not, because we don't investigate Trumps anymore, and we don't investigate any crimes unless there was a Democrat nearby and we could blame it on them. But I wonder whether there was any connection there. Well, if you let me talk with Eric, we'll endorse your peace plan, or maybe it was a matter of fact thing. Well, I'm on board with Trump with some other money-making scheme, so let's give him the thumbs up for this thing. I mean, I don't know. There was no offer of, or no word here about support from, I don't know, Morocco, Algeria, Sudan, but that's because there's no money there. Libya, whatever. Okay, maybe that's all there is to it. And by the way, Turkey and Pakistan. Oh, okay. Also, apparently, Pakistan is a member of the council, and they signed on too. Pakistan, okay. Turkey, I mean, you're going to want to have their support for it, I guess. But Turkey, of course, governed by the Erdogan regime. Pakistan, also, fairly close ties. Not quite in the same category, but it does take it outside of the small Arabian Peninsula Gulf state, region. And I don't believe that they've asked to talk to Eric that we know of. Mike Waltz, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, who addressed the council before the vote, called Gaza hell on earth. Awesome. And held up a copy of the resolution describing it as a lifeline. Well, that is just great. After the vote, Mr. Waltz thanked the council for, quote, joining us in charting a new course for Israelis and also the other people around here, Palestinians, and all the people in the region alike. Those are the people in the region, Israelis and Palestinians. Security Council resolutions are considered legally binding international law. Oh, well. And although the council does not have a mechanism for enforcing such resolutions, it can take measures to punish violators with penalties, such as sanctions. And believe me, Trump is already well aware that if I violate this thing by stealing more money or violating the agreement and throwing out all the Palestinians, even though I said I was going to do that, they didn't believe me and they thought they were approving something else. The UN could sanction the U.S. Good luck. How's that going to happen? All right. Well, I think he knows that. In a post on Truth Social, Mr. Trump wrote, "Congratulations to..." Oh, my God. I quit. "Congratulations to the world on the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the all caps Board of Peace, which will be chaired by me." They can't think he didn't say so. "And include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world." I'm sure it will. It'll be we will meet in the Rose Garden Club and Mar-a-Lago, and we will have the most beautiful world-shaped chocolate cake, the most beautiful cake you've ever seen. Still, the path forward is plagued by many uncertainties. With Israeli strikes, let's say, that would be one of them, continuing in Gaza and outbreaks of violence erupting in the West Bank. And I know that Trump's plan basically is, when I build my beautiful, beautiful buildings, if you bomb one of my beautiful, beautiful buildings, I'll be so angry. I will lose money. That is horrible. I will have you killed. I mean, it's a peace plan. All right. Well, the path forward is plagued by many uncertainties. For one thing, they're still having wars. And, of course, violence now erupting in the West Bank, which won't help matters either. But I'll be building a beautiful casino there later. Among the next steps would be naming members of the Board of Peace, the body in charge of overseeing the transition in Gaza, and clarifying under whose authority the stabilization forces would operate. I believe I have a very good idea about whose authority they will operate under. Greg Bovino, you're going to get to beat up more brown people than you ever dreamed of. The resolution says that if the Palestinian Authority, which partly governs the West Bank, undergoes reforms and the redevelopment of the shattered Gaza Strip advances, the conditions, quote, may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Or they could all be expelled. I mean, that's the other thing. And you could expel everyone from Gaza and say, go to the West Bank and live there under the Palestinian Authority, and then we'll bulldoze that place. Algeria's ambassador to the United Nations. Okay, here they are. They're weighing in. Amar Benjama. I think we got that. The only Arab member of the council who was negotiating on behalf of the United Nations Arab group. Where were the rest of the Arab group? And the answer is the Gulf and Arabian Arab group states were cashing in. They were getting pieces of the action, I think. Well, the Algerian ambassador actually, too bad. He's not on the side of reason either. He thanked Mr. Trump for his personal engagement in bringing the conflict in Gaza to the end. But he said the aspirations of Palestinians for a state should not be overlooked. So that seems like a good idea to pay attention to at the United Nations. I'm glad it was mentioned. Genuine peace in the Middle East cannot be achieved without justice. Justice for the Palestinian people who have waited for decades for the creation of their independent state, he said. Doesn't really sound like he meant it when he congratulated Mr. Trump, but whatever. That's fine. That's the way it should be. Many council members, including France, and then some of our rotating group, Guyana, Pakistan, Slovenia, and Somalia, had issues with the fact that the resolution did not include clear language on Palestinian statehood. But they said they had endorsed the proposal to support the political momentum, prevent the resurgence of violence, and allow much-needed humanitarian aid to flow into the enclave. They reiterated that the territorial integrity of Gaza must remain intact and that lasting peace must be rooted in a two-state solution. All right, well, I'll let Mr. Trump know. The language in the resolution about Palestinian statehood had drawn objections from Israel, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying on Sunday that our opposition to a Palestinian state in any territory has not changed. Among the challenges of the International Stabilization Force among the challenges they will face is how to confront Hamas's fighters who are still armed and present in Gaza. Hey, that does seem like a large problem, doesn't it? The resolution states that the force would be responsible for destroying military infrastructure in Gaza and decommissioning the militant group's weapons. And you take care of that, will you? Thank you. But Arab and Muslim countries expected to send soldiers to Gaza. Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, and the UAE are wary of their troops engaging in armed clashes with Palestinian militants and of any more bloodshed turning Arab public opinion against their involvement. And obviously, their ruling families, for instance, might be worried about that. The Trump administration sought the mandate at the United Nations because those countries said they needed Security Council authorization so that their troops would not be viewed by their own populations as occupiers in Gaza. Though I have a feeling they won't read the resolution. The people protesting. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, probably Danon. It's not two N's like three N's like the yogurt, double N, but Danon, I'm guessing Hebrew pronunciation, Danny Danon, I don't know, said on Monday, Danny, you can call me, the demilitarization of Hamas is a basic condition of the peace agreement. There will be no future in Gaza as long as Hamas possesses weapons. Fair enough. The resolution Hamas doesn't think so, but okay. The resolution went through multiple revisions and negotiations last week and faced significant pushback from many council members, including Europeans, who demanded more clarity on Palestinian statehood and the Board of Peace. Yeah, I'd like a little more clarity on the Board of Peace myself. Thank you very much. At one point last week, objections by China, and Russia, which is a hoax, which do typically coordinate their positions around resolutions by the United States. They threatened to derail the resolution altogether, which is amazing. Russia drafted its own 10-point counter-resolution on Gaza, which called outright for Palestinian statehood and said the Israeli-occupied West Bank and Gaza should be joined as a state under the Palestinian Authority. I think they did actually give a try to that at one point, not as a state, but as a independently governed enclave. And I believe the result was Hamas killed all the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. If you want to call the United Nations, now is the time. And it occurs to me when this story gets up to the edit suite and is heard by the I guess he's solidly Gen Z, right? And it's heard up in the editing suite. I'm not certain which will prompt more amazement. The idea that, I don't know if I told the full bit of the story, but that I had gone to the phone and I needed to call the UN. But how do you call the UN? And I think I mentioned, but maybe not. I called information. Yes, in New York, please, the number for the United Nations. Thank you. And I'm not sure which will prompt more amazement and confusion. Wait a minute. What? First of all, to tell a Gen Z person you called anyone on the telephone, like just actually called them. what did you do that for? Why didn't you text them? Well, that didn't exist. But they're very phone averse in general, that generation, and our kids in particular, I think. But so I don't know what will prompt more amazement. The idea that I answered the question of who's the Secretary General of the UN by calling the UN and asking, or the first part. You said you dialed what now? Information? What do you mean information? You just call. Who do you call for information? Like just general information? Well, information about telephone numbers. Oh, well, whatever. The idea of if I dial 411, what does that mean? They don't know. So anyway, none of that is the internet rendered it all obsolete. Anyway, I don't know. It was a fun story. Now, the less fun story. The UN Security Council, for some reason, thinks there's a real peace plan for Gaza, and they actually endorsed it. Now it has the force of international law. On the other hand, I will point out that there's also international law that says you can't just kill everybody in the Caribbean. And that doesn't seem to be working either. So, I mean, there's force of international law behind. That's a no-no, and yet we're not being held to account on that one. It is early days still, I guess. But, yeah. So if you're wondering about, like, the previous part of this story we were reading, well, if anybody violates the agreement, there could be sanctions. There are also, like, if, say, the United States violated everything, could also not be sanctions. I just want to throw that out there for your consideration. Okay, so where were we here? Right, yes. There was Russia drafted its own 10-point counter resolution calling for, let's see, Palestinian statehood, and that the West Bank and Gaza should be joined as a state under the Palestinian Authority. They haven't had much luck with that one, but they didn't get much chance to try either. Granted, everybody was terrible in that situation. But it should probably be pointed out, yeah, the Palestinian Authority was placed in charge of both the West Bank and Gaza. Also, there's a million levels of nuance that actual Palestinians will know much better. But the Palestinian Authority, that would be the governing body, all right, but they have to fill the governing body with somebody. They filled them with members of the party, the Fatah party, I suppose you would call it. I don't know. I'm not that much of a follower of that level of the politics. But as I recall, they did do that. And there were elections, and Hamas basically operating as a party said, hey, we lost all these elections, or weren't really contesting them because I don't know whether they've contested them as outright as members of a Hamas party. I don't know the history of it, but I do know this part of the history of it. They were unhappy with the results, and so they murdered all the winners. And then basically the West Bank connected Fatah party members who continued to run the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank lost control by virtue of their deaths in Gaza. And then basically Hamas said, well, we'll just govern Gaza. That was actually our plan from the beginning. So, it's kind of an integral part of getting to a thing where a civil body runs Gaza. You're going to either have to get rid of the uncivil body that runs it now, or find some way of convincing them that they should be civil, or taking away all their toys, I guess. So, after the vote, Russia and China said they had abstained from the vote because the resolution lacked clarity on key components. Like, to me, that's a no, but all right. And that the United States had not responded to multiple demands to provide more details on the Board of Peace and a two-state solution, and that Palestinian self-determination for post-war governance in the enclave was not fully reflected. Like, to me, all of those, each one is a deal killer, but what do I know? I'm not Russia or China. And like I said, they probably also were saying, this is like tailor-made to engulf the United States in a quagmire that sinks them not only there in the Middle East, but internationally. Go ahead. Go for it. And that's it. Today, but that's part of the crazy pill situation. Like, normally they say, we're just going to vote no on that. I mean, why? but they're up to such mischief and they're run by weirdos that, Russia more so, I think, than China. Putin saying, I don't really care about what the outcome is so long as it's disastrous for the United States. And China saying, I don't know. I don't know what they're saying. I guess they're probably thinking, well, if it is disastrous for whoever, as long as it's not disastrous for us, we can come in and sign 99-year leases for ports and airports and do the Belt and Road thing in Gaza. I mean, that's interesting, too, that the world didn't say. The United States is actually typically fairly bad at this whole nation building thing, and you keep saying you reject it as a mission, but China has gotten pretty good practice at it. Maybe we should let them do it. I'm glad they did not say that, but the Chinese probably should have proposed it. Anyway, they didn't. Today is a sorrowful day for the Security Council. Russia's ambassador to the UN, that's Vasily Nebenzia. That's my best guess. Well, Vasily told the entire council that it's a sorrowful day for the Security Council. That's why we abstained. That is not. It's not that sorrowful. You could have voted no. He called the resolution, quote, yet another pig in a poke. Something obtained without careful inspection first. They're now, the New York Times is telling us what pig in a poke means. That's interesting. And said the United States had gotten it through by twisting the arms of members of the Security Council. Well, then just vote no. I don't know. I don't really understand why I guess that's really it. They just figured chaos will reign and we're into that. Pig in a poke. I'm glad they, by the way, it's not the same as waiting for the penny to drop, nor the other shoe. It's a very different saying, idiom. All right. So now we have enough Gen Z and younger readers that we now have to explain these things in the pages of the New York Times. It does remind me that another major story overnight was, I guess, during the flight home, the chaos flight home from Pervalago over the weekend. I think it was then. I don't know why it didn't break earlier in the day, but I guess he got mad. Trump got mad with a Bloomberg reporter, a woman, and told her, be quiet, piggy. He calls her piggy in front of everybody, which was amazing. And yeah, just like people pointing out, I know it's hard to do these things in the moment, but like the whole press corps needed to just be like, boo, Mr. President, that's at a minimum, Mr. President, that's crazy. You can't say that. We're not going to talk to you. Forget it. Of course, no one wants to give up their access. And normal discourse, believe it or not, I want to advocate for civil discourse, but honestly, pointing in a woman's face and saying, shut up, piggy. Normally you get kneed in the crotch or pepper sprayed in the face for that, but this is the president of the United States. So you're not allowed to do that, but it should strike you as odd that you're saying, oh, but this is the president of the United States who's just said this. But there we go. Anyway, that's not the same thing as a pig in the poke. I just was reminded of it and thought it was crazy, and another reason why I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Let's get through this thing and then on to the other crazy stuff. Some of it anyway. The United States made minimal compromises on the resolution and instead rallied the support of the Arab and Muslim countries to pressure Russia and China not to be seen as obstacles to a breakthrough in Gaza. Diplomats said that Mr. Waltz had also warned the countries during negotiations that if the resolution failed, the ceasefire in Gaza would collapse. And that's a pressure point. I don't know that it follows that would be the case, nor could I say, and I'm sure that the members that they were prevailing upon understood this. I'm not really certain you can say there is a ceasefire in Gaza. There's less fire than there used to be, but I don't know if it's really a ceasefire. And to the extent that there is one, given that there's actual firing going on, maybe it already has collapsed. Anyway, the stakes were high for all the major actors. Palestinians want the suffering and the war to end. That seems like, one of the larger stakes you could have in the situation. Israelis want Hamas disarmed. That's a big one, too. And the United States hoped to be the major player bringing peace to the region. That, of course, the stakes there, without their saying it, the whisper underlying that is Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize. The UN Secretary General, now we're going to find out who it is if you didn't know, Antonio Guterres So there you go. Hello, this is Antonio Guterres. I am not in right now. Please leave me a message if you are a sixth grader or older, because anyway, he welcomed the resolution, saying in a statement that it was an important step and he encouraged all parties to abide by it. I can't believe it. It is essential now to translate the diplomatic momentum into concrete and urgently needed steps on the ground, he said. That's true of everything, but I can't believe that we are at a stage where the UN Secretary General is like, yeah, sure, it's a plan. We need to work out some of the details, like this idea of I'm going to be the president of the Board of Peace is maybe an obstacle to that. The resolution allows the World Bank, a UN entity, to allocate financial resources for the reconstruction of Gaza and calls for the establishment of a dedicated trust fund for this purpose. It authorizes the Board of Peace to oversee Gaza at least until the end of 2027 and says that the enclave would be managed day to day by who? A technocratic, apolitical committee of competent Palestinians from the Strip. Who says this? The UN resolution. Okay, I mean, it does say that, but that is a little bit unclear. And then it doesn't mention that the president is running around saying, no, it's me. I'm going to run it. The stabilization force would also coordinate with Egypt and Israel to train and support Palestinian police personnel, protect civilians, work to secure humanitarian corridors, and secure border areas. And none of that has been a problem to date, so it'll probably work just fine. I don't know what to tell you. I can't believe it. They got to endorse something, I guess, but just, I don't know. This feels like an incomplete assignment, and they would have sent it back and say, we got to get some clarification. I can't vote for something that has no indication that anybody involved understands the complexity of what they're doing, and they're just saying, why don't we just appoint a Board of Peace and then there'll be peace? Like, that's not really enough of a plan for me. I require more. All right. There's a lot of crazy pill stuff going on. There's another story. ProPublica has pro-published it, and I'm way behind on our ProPublica reading, but I'll tell you the story here, and then I'll give you the comment of one of the people who brought it to my attention. It is the White House. This is the title. The White House intervened on behalf of accused sex trafficker. And I'll stop there, and you'll say, in your head, except I'll say, no, it's the other one, or another one. Andrew Tate, during a federal investigation. The details are important, but this is a story about the White House intervening on behalf of Andrew Tate. And here, again, I'll tell you, there was a good comment made. Andrew Lawrence on Blue Sky, I think I'll say he put it best, although I haven't really reviewed what everyone else has said. Mr. President, sir, there's a story coming out about how you intervened to help a sex criminal. No, sir, not that sex criminal that you helped. No, not that one either. Sir, please stop guessing sex criminals that you helped. I'll give you a hint, though, sir. He's a trafficker. No, sir, not that trafficker, a different one. That's what we're looking at. What a play. I mean, I guess he hasn't done anything new, maybe. I don't know. We better read the story and find out whether he did something new or this is just coming out. It wouldn't be beyond the abilities, we'll call them abilities, of the chaos-loving White House to do something dumb right now in the middle of the Epstein thing, which is supposed to be happening today in the House. And I guess we have a responsibility to follow up yesterday's discussion of it and find out what's going on. Because yesterday we were unclear why the Rules Committee was involved in it at all. And I have an answer, but it's still not clear. But maybe we'll go to that in just a minute. ProPublica says this: the White House intervened on behalf of accused sex trafficker Andrew Tate during a federal investigation, and that is because the president loves sex trafficking. They didn't say that in the headline. You're meant to understand that from context, but it's not in the headline because they have a legal department. Federal authorities were chided. Why? For seizing electronic devices from Tate and his brother, even though they were using them for sex trafficking. And they were told to return them by the White House, I guess. And this reasoning, again, is the same, because they were using them in sex trafficking, right? The FBI took them because they were using them in sex trafficking, and they thought, we're law enforcement, we should take this away from them because these guys shouldn't be sex trafficking. No one should. And the White House said, yes, they should, and they might even be trafficking to people we like. Give them their phones back because people here are horny. That's it. That's the reason. I don't believe this is in the report, but it's all implied. Federal authorities were chided for seizing electronic devices from Tate and his brother and told to return them. Records and interviews show. Experts said the intervention was highly inappropriate. You're right. So is the behavior of the people involved. So would be the motivations of the people involved in giving back the electronic devices that were taken from the people involved. Here's the story. Like I said, ProPublica, Robert Fatorecci, I hope. Oh, I don't know. And Avi Asher Shapiro. Apologies about the names if I didn't get them right. Here's the deal. Online influencer and sex trafficker, I guess, Andrew Tate, a self-described misogynist. It's very odd for people to be self-described misogynists, but these are the things you can do in the age of convincing the UN Security Council that my board of awesomeness will take care of it. Anyway, self-described misogynist who has millions of young male followers was facing allegations of sex trafficking women in 3 countries where he and his brother left their home in Romania when he and his brother left their home in Romania to visit the United States. Okay. What? I got to read that again. Online influencer Andrew Tate, self-described misogynist, yes, facing allegations of sex trafficking women in 3 countries when he and his brother left their home in Romania to visit the United States. Okay. Got it. The Tates will be free. Trump is the president. The good old days are back, Tate posted on X before the trip in February, one of many times he has sung the president's praises to his fans. But when the Tate brothers arrived by private plane in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, they immediately found themselves in the crosshairs of law enforcement once more as Customs and Border Protection officials seized their electronic devices. I can't believe that Customs and Border Protection officials were mean to somebody. This is outrageous. This time, they had a powerful ally come to their aid. Behind the scenes, the White House intervened on their behalf. And by the way, who lives in the White House? Everybody knows, right? It wasn't the House did it. You're telling me a House fried this rice? No, it was the President of the United States. Or people who pretend to be the President of the United States and wield an auto pen and just say, I don't know, in signal chats say, I once heard the President, grumble something and nod his head about that. It's a go. Interviews and records reviewed by ProPublica show a White House official told senior Department of Homeland Security officials to return the devices to the brothers several days after they were seized. And by the way, if the president says, I didn't know anything about it, I don't know who it was that did that, we'll look into it. My answer to that is unitary executive, sir. You can't take the good parts and leave behind the bad. Yes, I can. And I mean, he may be able to do that. What if Eileen Cannon reviews the case? Like maybe he can. That's where we are. The official who delivered the message, it was Paul Ingrassia. We've read a little bit about him. I think we didn't read all of the profiles we've had for him, but he's been introduced to you. Maybe you've forgotten along the way, and I forget how much we read about it, but it was certainly an entry in the Rogues Gallery. One of the, weirdo, QAnon, incel, whatever, Groiper adjacent people who not only have landed in the White House, but I think we read a profile of him. And I saw another one recently where somebody said on Blue Sky pretty much the same thing that I think we said about him at some earlier point, that the White House is just absolutely determined that this guy should land in a job in the administration, like Ed Martin, where he keeps getting kicked out of the jobs that the White House wants him in. They just find him another one. Paul Ingrassia, very much the same. And by the way, this is Paul Ingrassia, White House official in the unitary executive, of course, who is the very same Paul Ingrassia who, as a lawyer, previously represented the Tate brothers before joining the White House, where he is now working as its DHS liaison. So, yeah, I mean, the whole angle in the story here is their defense attorney now works for the White House, and they're like, yeah, give back. I order the government to give back all of the evidence-bearing electronic devices to my clients. I mean, the terribly put upon Tate brothers. Wow. I mean, this should be read also alongside the article we didn't read yesterday, and I'm still thinking about reading at least some of it on the air about interviewing the 60 lawyers, the New York Times, who left the Justice Department and tell their individual tales of the abuses that finally convinced them to leave. We really should discuss some of that. In his written request, a copy of which was viewed by ProPublica, Ingrassia chided authorities for taking the action, saying the seizure of the Tate's devices was not a good use of time or resources. That's some very fine point legal analysis there. The request to return the electronics to the Tates, he emphasized, was coming from the White House. So, pretending that the president is speaking, I'm speaking on his behalf. The incident is the latest in the string of law enforcement matters where the Trump White House, I was going to say Trump administration, but the Trump White House has inserted itself to help friends and target foes. Since entering office for a second term, Trump has urged the Justice Department to go after elected officials who investigated him and his businesses, and he pardoned a string of political allies and insurrectionists. I'll add that. Andrew Tate is one of the most prominent members of the so-called manosphere, a collection of influencers, podcasters, and content creators who help deliver young male voters to Trump. They make it sound like it's a legitimate enterprise, but of course it is not. Basically he's saying, I like to tell young men to beat bitches. And if you think that's cool, vote for Trump. And it worked. But it's not... it's not organized as well, never mind. I was going to say it's not organized necessarily as a political movement, but it actually kind of is. And it was all, I think we read years ago, devised by Steve Bannon, who apparently was in a codependent relationship of sorts with Jeffrey Epstein. The big batch of emails now reveals these two guys. Actually, I don't know which one would say they were advising the other, but they were both each advising the other one. Bannon advising Epstein apparently how to rehab his image, his public relations. By the way, he did great there. He's a really great consultant, Bannon is. And Epstein advising Bannon how to build and consolidate power and have influence over Trump. And it seems so perfect. What a great pairing. Nobody in the world knows what either of these two nutbags does for money, and they're advising each other right up until one of them is dead, and the other one went to jail and committed suicide. I think Bannon is dead. He looks dead, but he apparently keeps talking. It may just be an AI hologram. Anyway, right. So we were talking about Paul Ingrassia intervening on behalf of Tate. That he's a member of the most prominent members of the manosphere, and news of the White House intervention on behalf of the accused sex traffickers comes as Trump is under fire over his ties to notorious child sex offender and trafficker, just put it right in there, and his administration, Jeffrey Epstein, of course, and his administration's recent efforts to stop the public release of the so-called Epstein files, which he now no longer says that he is against, but that's because he said, get rid of anything that's bad about me, and then release the bad stuff about other people that I don't like. Ingrassia's intervention on behalf of Tate and his brother Tristan caused alarm among DHS officials that they could be interfering with a federal investigation if they followed through with the instruction, according to interviews and screenshots of contemporaneous communications between officials. And here we must be talking about people who have been career civil servants in the DHS this whole time, because there's no sense in which we could possibly believe that people like, say, Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski and others could have evaluated the situation that clearly. One official who was involved and spoke on condition of anonymity to avoid facing retribution, of course, said they were disgusted by the request's, quote, brazenness and the high-handed expectation of complicity. That will have roots both in the fact that Ingrassia was Tate's defense attorney and the fact that Ingrassia was barely qualified to be an attorney and was apparently, I mean, remember that I think our first introduction to him when we read the first couple profiles of him was he was the guy who was still in law school and then went around like telling everybody I'm an attorney and you know, claiming to be an attorney and claiming to have had cases before he ever graduated from law school, which is, you can collaborate on cases, certainly, that somebody else is actually running, but that's not what he was up to. So he's like a little bit of like a Lindsay Halligan, Ed Martin mashup. Among the three of them, they're all barely qualified as an attorney anywhere, but they're being handed the highest profile stuff in the world. And he can get away with it by just saying, I speak for the president. And everybody's saying, I don't know, he might. I don't know. Ordinarily we'd say, no, he's crazy, but the president's crazy, so maybe he does. It was so offensive to what we're all here to do, to uphold the law and protect the American people, the person said. We don't want to be seen as handing out favors. Too bad, you need to resign. It's unclear why law enforcement wanted to examine the devices. I think probably evidence of sex trafficking of minors. But it's also unclear what their analysis found, if there was one, or whether Ingrassia's intervention hindered any investigation. Probably. The White House and DHS declined to answer questions about the incident, but law enforcement experts said it's highly unusual for the White House to get involved in particular border seizures or demand authorities give up custody of potential evidence in an investigation. It is unusual. I've never heard of anything like it in my 30 years working, said John F. Tobin, who's now going to be retaliated against, a retired assistant director for the Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. That's one of the initials you now see on Kevlar vests of people tackling landscapers around the country these days, which typically analyzes the contents, HSI, analyze the contents of electronic devices after they're seized by Customs and Border Protection. For anyone to say this request is from the White House, it feels like it's an intimidation tactic. It's normally the sort of thing, by the way, a more competent, shady crook would not say it, you know, by the way, this carries the full weight of the presidency behind it. But Paul Ingrassia will say that. He will threaten you with things like that because he's dumb and a bad lawyer. Tobin said that even if authorities resisted the request from Ingrassia, knowledge that the White House opposed their actions could cause them to be less aggressive than they would normally be. Anytime somebody feels intimidated or as if they're not free to follow procedure, that's going to stay in the back of their mind because of the consequences. In this administration, the consequences are different. People are getting fired. So, yes, it's on their mind. Samuel Buell, a Duke University law professor and former federal prosecutor, called the pressure on behalf of the Tates another data point. Another data point. Holy cow. Keep your pants on there, Buell. There's a pattern here of severe departure from pre-existing norms that are being tossed aside left and right. Well, he's trying to be careful, otherwise he'll get dismissed from Duke Law School as a DEI activist. The Tate brothers' current lawyer, Joseph McBride, said he didn't know what happened to the devices, but that his clients still not have had them returned. He says it's unclear whether any investigation into their contents is continuing. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm torn between the instinct to change directions, or not necessarily change, but throw in more data points for the professor over here. But I don't know. I feel like Tuesday is a day to do in-depth focus on things like this. Friday, another good day for that when the decks are cleared. And sometimes reading in depth through all of this helps make later reviews of other stories that much more meaningful and impactful. I'm going to stick with this one, but I am going to add this note that Justice sent to me. Now that all of the social media decks are back online, they happened over the break. He reminds us that Ingrassia's mom has been in the news before, and not just as an answer from the White House press office, who ordered this, your mom. Paul Ingrassia's mom pulled a May Musk. We're calling it that, huh? And harassed Dems to give him a break, and he attaches the story. I think we did read this story about Ingrassia, but this one from the Daily Beast, but available to us because it's on the MSN network, which I thought changed its name. Anyway, mother of scandalized Trump nominee harassed Congress to confirm her son. When was that from? A couple weeks ago? It says 3 weeks, but why is the date not there? All right. Well, anyway, embattled Trump nominee Paul Ingrassia reportedly called in reinforcements to secure his confirmation. Did he get it? His mother, Donna Gallo Ingrassia, not Callow, Gallo Ingrassia, a New York-based real estate agent. Oh, one of those. Attempted to intervene on her 30-year-old son's behalf by personally visiting the offices of Representatives Jamie Raskin, that's going to work, and Robert Garcia, top Democrats on the Judiciary and Oversight Committees, notice reported. By the way, note to Mrs. Ingrassia, the confirmation for your son would be before what we call the United States Senate, always how to pronounce it, but just so you get the spelling right, Senate, and of course, Representatives Jamie Raskin and Robert Garcia would be on the House Judiciary and Oversight Committee. And while I'm sure they were concerned with your son's activities and confirmation, it's right in the same building, actually, if you just go over to the other side. Basically, I'm just saying, just go over there. Go away from us to over there, and then you'll be able to talk to somebody about your son. If confirmed, this is back then, Ingrassia would be responsible for protecting federal whistleblowers and enforcing civil service laws, a prospect that Raskin and Garcia expressed grave concern over in a joint letter released on June 26th. And I don't know whether this, I assume, I don't remember offhand, but the fact that we're talking about him as the DHS liaison in the White House leads me to believe that they didn't confirm Ingrassia in that. And I have this vague recollection that we did read at some point or mention at some point, maybe we didn't read the story, that Ingrassia, I guess, withdrew his candidacy for the Senate confirmed job and now is in this other one and basically still doing, making mischief there. Just as chaotically or causing as much chaos as he would have in the other job. Anyway, let's go back. This is a long article, and I guess we really want to hear more about it. I do. Anyway, Ingrassia, before we broke, we mentioned that the Tate brothers' lawyers, Joseph McBride, said, I don't know what happened to those devices. I don't know if they're still investigating them. I know nothing about this. Call Paul Ingrassia. His clients, he said, are innocent, and there was no illicit materials on their electronics. How does he know that if there was no investigation of it? I don't know. It's just one of those things you say as a defense lawyer outside of court. There have been multiple investigations against them, and nothing has come of it, McBride said. And that's frustrating internationally, I am sure. Not for him, but for us. Ingrassia, by the way, before he was working in the White House and the manosphere and wherever else, he worked at McBride's firm before joining the White House. That's how he ended up that's how both he and McBride came to be lawyers for the Tates at some point in their careers. So before joining the White House, he worked with McBride, and McBride acknowledged speaking to Paul from time to time, but couldn't recall discussing the seized devices with him. Ingrassia, he said, has never given the Tate special treatment since joining the Trump administration. Sure. The White House declined to answer questions about whether Ingrassia, everything moved because of a ad here. White House declined to answer questions about whether he was acting on his own or representing the White House's wishes, but who cares, unitary executive. In a brief interview with ProPublica, Ingrassia denied trying to help the Tates before hanging up. There was no intervention. Nothing happened. He said, there was nothing. And then click, I guess. Ingrassia has a lawyer, by the way. It's Edward Polczyk, who said in a text message, Mr. Ingrassia never ordered that the Tate brothers' devices be returned to them, nor did he say, and nor would he ever have said, that such a directive came from the White House. This story is fiction, simply not true. Oh. When questioned about whether Ingrassia had asked authorities to return the devices, even if he did not order them to, Polczyk declined to comment, explaining that the word ask is inappropriate because it's meaningless in this context. He either ordered something or he didn't. And as I said, he did not order anything. A DHS spokesperson did not respond to specific questions about the intervention or any impact it might have had on any investigation, only saying in a statement that Customs and Border Protection performed a 100% baggage examination and examined all electronic media devices when the Tate brothers entered the country. Electronic media devices were detained and turned over to Homeland Security investigators for inspectional purposes. Ingrassia's work at McBride's small New York law firm included helping to represent the Tate brothers. Of course, you know that. He has praised Andrew Tate's physical prowess on social media, along with his willpower and spirit, calling him the embodiment of the ancient ideal of excellence. And maybe the ancient ideal probably included the misogyny. Ethics experts said when government officials take actions to benefit former clients, it undermines public trust. But of course, that's what we now call, it's also called the Department of Justice right now. So maybe it doesn't undermine public trust. Unless, of course, the Department of Justice has been weaponized. That couldn't have happened. The rule of law cannot be carried out if it depends on cronyism, said Virginia Cantor, a former government ethics lawyer who served in the administrations of both parties. So there you go. Both parties, both sides. To have a member of the White House interfere when they've had a prior client relationship and some sort of personal relationship, that gives rise to questions of impartiality. Questions about their ability to maintain their impartiality, really, but I see what she's getting at here. But she's served administrations of both parties. And remember, that is meant to be a signal to the normie establishment that that person will be disinterested and will, in fact, give us the true interpretation of what's going on. And we're all meant to be shocked by it, and ProPublica certainly wants us to be shocked by it. But naturally, it will be ignored by, pretty much everybody else. This is supposed to give you license to attack this viciously and feel like you're on safe ground. Someone who worked for someone of both parties says this is absolutely a disaster. We'll see whether the news media take the cover they're being offered or not and move forward with this. All right, where were we? Trump had nominated Ingrassia. Here's the answer to the previous question. I ordered the previous question, which was this. Trump had nominated Ingrassia to lead the Office of Special Counsel. Right, that would have been the role from which he was protecting whistleblowers. But the 30-year-old lawyer's chances for Senate confirmation imploded after Politico reported that he had sent a string of racist text messages to fellow Republicans and described himself as having a Nazi streak. That's a quote, a Nazi streak. Now, wow, I mean, there's a lot wrapped up in that. You probably should have choked on your coffee at the idea that the head of the Office of Special Counsel should be a 30-year-old. For any reason. No. And then, of course, maybe the whole string of racist text messages and saying I'm a Nazi. Yeah, well, it did get in the way. That's true. Palcic, his lawyer, raised doubts about the authenticity of the texts, but said even if the texts are authentic, they clearly read as a self-deprecating and satirical humor. Or a sense of humor, I don't know. Read as self-deprecating, not a self-deprecating. I don't know. Got it. Sure. I'm sure everything's fine. In a post on X announcing he was withdrawing a Senate confirmation hearing from it because not enough Republican lawmakers were supporting him. That's a good reason. I withdrew because I was going to lose. True. Ingrassia said he would, quote, continue to serve President Trump in this administration to make America great again. And indeed he did. Last week, he continued getting paid to do that. I wouldn't say it's fair to say that he did, in fact, serve President Trump in this administration and help make America great again because he let the Tate brothers go. Last week, Ingrassia announced he was moving to a new role within the administration. Last week, really. After Trump called him into his office and asked him to serve as Deputy General Counsel at the General Services Administration. So that would really have nothing whatsoever to do with the Tates, for instance. But I guess his last act as DHS liaison was save the Tates and let some notorious sex traffickers go. And it is interesting. I don't think it's related because I don't think Trump knows this stuff, but you could look at this and say, All right, we're going to make you, we'll put you in the office of special counsel that requires Senate confirmation. No. This guy says he is a Nazi streak, and he's sent a number of racist text messages, and he's a liar about whether he's a lawyer, and he represents scumbags, and, no, we're not going to vote for him. All right, I'll make him DHS liaison. Okay, except he's going to use his job as DHS liaison to continue to do the disgusting stuff with the sex traffickers. All right, come into my office. I'm moving you to the General Services Administration. It could be read that way. But I don't think Trump is that, good. It's unclear what prompted authorities to seize the Tates' property. I mean, besides their strong record of sex trafficking underage women. But the bar for searching electronic devices is significantly lower for those entering the U.S. compared with those already in the country, even if they are citizens. After the seizure, the contents were examined by federal agents with Homeland Security investigations, according to an official involved. A Homeland Security, everything keeps moving. The ad isn't even on screen anymore, but a Homeland Security official who asked for an anonymity. Why? Because he was afraid he was going to get bomb threats, basically. Although this time he says, well, I don't have permission to speak publicly, which also leads me to believe that when I do, I'll get bomb threats. Confirmed that HSI agents scrutinized the contents, so somebody knows what's on those phones. They're just not saying. The Tates left the United States in March. Good. Don't come back. The criminal charges have been filed against, no criminal charges, have been filed against the brothers in the United States. Other countries have done that. Though a lawyer representing four anonymous defendants sued by them in Florida filed court papers this year suggesting that federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York were investigating the pair. So they need to find out who they are and fire them. No other details have become public, and a spokesperson for the prosecutor's office declined to comment. In an interview with the conservative podcaster Candace Owens, soon after landing in Florida, Andrew Tate revealed his devices had been seized, saying they were taken after he refused to give customs officers his passwords. Tate, who was born, and maybe he just wanted to say, I am guilty of sex trafficking, was his password. And, I would also have advised him not to give him the password, but for separate reasons. But definitely if that was your password. Tate, who was born in the U.S. but spent much of his childhood in Britain before moving as an adult to Romania, where he could do sex trafficking, although that's who charged him, complained that his rights were violated, calling himself one of the most innocent people on the planet. Well, it's good to have a general conceit of yourself. That's very, he's got no self-esteem problems. And he said law enforcement officials wouldn't find anything on his devices. You think I sleep with a phone full of evidence? Yes, I do. You think I don't wipe my phone every night? You think I'm dumb? Come get me. I look forward to the day they read that back to you at sentencing. In that interview, Tate made no mention of a White House official intervening on his behalf and seemingly misidentified state authorities in Florida as being responsible for taking his devices. He's just... you can't blame him for being unaware of the nuances of federalism, really. Shortly after the Tates landed on February 27th, Governor Ron DeSantis and his state attorney general, James Utmeyer, who's also terrible, announced that Florida authorities had launched an investigation into the brothers. One of the best things they ever did, if they really meant it, I guess. Utmeyer said his office had, quote, secured and executed subpoenas and warrants and called the brothers' behavior atrocious. That's good. They may just be in it to get up, if the Tates will give each of them a Lamborghini, things might be fine. I'm not really sure whether there's, principled behavior behind this or not. These guys have themselves publicly admitted to participating in what very much appears to be soliciting, trafficking, preying upon women around the world. He said at the time, we're not going to accept it. All right. The status of the Florida investigation is unclear because it might not be real. A spokesperson for the Florida Attorney General declined to comment for this article. Allegations of sexual abuse and violence have swirled around Andrew Tate for almost as long as he's been in the public eye. Because, of course, what puts him in the public eye is confessing to allegations of sexual abuse and violence. That's his shtick. And that's just the content he creates. And, of course, there's going to be allegations because that's what he's after. In 2016, Tate was booted off the cast of the British version of the Big Brother reality series. Bad idea there, anyway. Around the time a video emerged of him whipping a woman with a belt. Yeah, that ought to do it. Tate said he and the woman were joking. Yeah. Tate's profile only rose afterward, because great. And he began amassing a following as a self-help guru for young men, like help yourself to beating women with belts. He quickly aligned himself with Trump's then-young MAGA movement, because they wouldn't get rid of him. The Tate family support Trump fully. MAGA, he posted on social media after the meeting with Donald Trump Jr. at Trump Tower in 2017. If it's whipping women, I love it, is what he said, probably. Tate moved to Romania a year after his brief foray in reality TV, in part, he said, because he believed authorities there investigate sex crimes less aggressively. Like, that's... You see, he's asking for it, right? I'm not a rapist, but I like the idea of being able to do what I want, he said. Look, that's just a generally applicable statement. I'm not a rapist. I like to be able to do what I want, but what I want involves, nobody else, for one thing. And mostly it's just like I want food and shelter, and I like those things, and it's nice to have access to the internet, too. It's a general statement. We need more clarity before we vote on this at the UN Security Council as a manifesto. But in 2023, prosecutors in Romania accused the Tates of operating a criminal group that trafficked women, including some who alleged that the brothers led them to believe that they were interested in relationships, but instead forced them into filming online pornographic videos. That's trafficking. Prosecutors also said they were investigating allegations that the Tates trafficked minors. Andrew Tate, who was charged with rape, he just was, period. That's it. I thought there was more to it. Andrew Tate was charged with rape, period. The end. The Tates have denied the allegations, and the initial charges against them were sent back to prosecutors by a court because of procedural issues. Even in Romania, you got to get it right. The Tates face similar allegations in Britain. Authorities there authorized a raft of charges against the brothers, including rape and human trafficking. It's pretty much the same things that they're charged with everywhere. Based on allegations from 3 women. In 2024, arrest warrants were issued for the brothers, who have denied wrongdoing. They keep saying that. But authorities said they would not be extradited to the United Kingdom until criminal proceedings in Romania were completed. A woman who has also sued the Tates in Florida, we learned about that earlier. Is this a different one? Accusing them of luring her to Romania to coerce her into sex work. And if you're in Florida and someone invites you to Romania, unless it's for a vacation, don't go. I don't know. Even then, don't go. The Tates have denied the allegation. If Tate invites you, don't go. I'll say that. Enjoy yourself in Romania. Have a great time. The Tates have denied the allegations, and last month the judge dismissed most of her claims, but allowed for her to refile. Was it Eileen Cannon? I do not know. Probably not. There's a lot of judges in Florida, but you can check the link and find out. This year, Tate derided the allegations against him and compared himself to Trump on X. Romania? No case UK? No case USA? No case, he posted on X. Lawfare? I'm one of the most mistreated men in history, besides President Trump himself. He stole the line from him, but he acknowledged it at the end. So it's not plagiarism. The intervention on behalf of the Tates was not the first time those around Trump took an interest in legal issues involving the brothers. In February, Romania's foreign minister said that presidential envoy Richard Grenell, who's also got a terrific reputation, told him at an international security conference in Germany that he remained interested in the fate of the Tates. That rhymes. I did not perceive this statement as pressure, the foreign minister, another Emil. This one, not Emil Bove, but Emil, Horizano, maybe, said, well, I didn't perceive this as pressure, just a repeat of a known stance. He's a good diplomat, this guy. Grenell told the Financial Times that he had, quote, no substantive conversation with Horizano. Oh my goodness. It's, by the way, Hurezeanu. But he supported the Tate brothers as evident by my publicly available tweets. And Richard Grenell, perhaps something of a misogynist himself, but he's not trafficking in women as far as I know. I don't know who he's trafficking in, if anyone. But anyway, that's the end of the very long article. I think it was very worthwhile to put all of that on record. Just in the middle of all the Epstein things. Yes, another sex trafficker that Trump is intervening to, I don't know, to help them avoid prosecution. All right. So speaking of the Epstein things, I will read you this from Noah Berlatsky at Public Notice, which examines the politics of what's going on. And then maybe we can take a poke around to see what the procedure is today. I don't know what the schedule is, and maybe actually quickly I should take a look. Ordinarily, I will see something from the House Democratic whip telling us what the floor schedule is for today. And yeah, let's see. Is this... all right, well, lots of short hits today. Is the Epstein thing get its own standalone? Yeah, there it is. Interesting, too. The procedure listed in the whip note is a suspension bill on this. So, all right. So interesting that maybe that's what is that what they decided to do with it at the Rules Committee? All right. Well, we'll get to that later on because that's going to take some unraveling. But first, Noah Berlatsky's piece here. Mike Johnson's Epstein bungling is a disaster for the Gop, which is terrific. And he makes a good point here. The House Speaker and his boss, Trump obviously, put on a master class of failure. But really, that's an interesting subheader right there. The Speaker and his boss. Like the Speaker is supposed to be his own boss, his or her own boss. But this one isn't. And that's problematic for our constitutional system of government. And it's bad. But Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has been plotting for almost 2 months to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And last week, all his schemes reached fruition. No, this is interesting. This is a good point politically. No sooner had Democrats in the Senate cravenly surrendered, even if that wouldn't be your choice of words, but a lot of you would be. No sooner had Democrats in the Senate cravenly surrendered on the shutdown battle than Johnson was forced to finally, after 50 days, swear in Arizona Democrat Adelita Grijalva. She immediately signed the discharge petition mandating the release of the files relating to sex offender and Trump pal Jeffrey Epstein. That is true. And Johnson, in other words, committed an egregious abuse of power. Why? For the express purpose of ensuring that a Democratic shutdown loss would be quickly superseded by a loss for the White House and a public explosion of an ugly scandal that exposes deep fault lines in the MAGA coalition. Yeah, now that you mention it, that's exactly right. They had Democrats, tearing each other's heads off over the craven surrender and yelling and screaming, and we want a new Senate minority leader, and we're going to do something about it. We want him primaried, and we want this one primaried and that one primaried. And right in the middle of all that, Mike Johnson said, what if we reminded everybody what a huge sex pervert the president is? Let's do that. And I'll continue. This is a great point. He kept continuing to delay swearing her in. And he had all sorts of excuses, and I guess once he laid out what his position was going to be, he wasn't going to change his mind and swear her in earlier, though it was entirely possible. Nothing at all standing in the way of swearing her in during a pro forma session. It would have been fine. But he chose to do it this way, and it's not entirely clear why, especially as now the president is saying, all the Republicans, you should vote for it. Go ahead and do it. Why did I delay all of that? And now, in the end, in hindsight, looking back on this, all you did was ensure that whatever happened at the end of the shutdown was going to coincide with the Epstein situation exploding again. And I don't know whether you thought you could handle it or sweep it to one side or get the president eventually to say it's okay. I'm not going to threaten anybody who votes to release it. I mean, if that was the goal, sure, he got that. But yeah, the idea, all this time, he probably thought I'm a genius for delaying swearing in Adelita Grijalva, and all it ends up meaning is these two things are going to explode at the same moment. It reminds me a little bit of when they were floating other Senate caving packages, and they said the Democrats said, we'll take a 1-year extension of the ACA subsidies, and people got very angry about it, and maybe rightly so. But now I guess you would rather have had that, wouldn't you? But it doesn't matter. The Republicans rejected it right away. But I was pointing out it's only 1 year, but it does set up the idea of having the subsidies expire and having all the premium increase notices going out just prior to the 2026 elections. And that might be good politically. If you thought it was good politically in the 2025 off-year elections and special elections, then why wouldn't you want it to happen again later? You probably would, but you wouldn't be able to believe your luck if you could get Republicans to agree to it. Anyway, what he ended up doing was saying, now we can bring Epstein back at the moment that we win the shutdown. And I think they've always believed they were going to win the shutdown. But what if we also simultaneously engineered something that would erase all of that positive publicity with something very, very, very negative? Let's try it. And that's what happened. And Noah Berlatsky makes that great point. There's more. The speaker's almost unbelievable incompetence, which is also Trump's unbelievable incompetence, because there's nothing independent about whether the speaker operates, I guess. This in no way erases or excuses the failure to defend health care for the American people. He just wants you to know that. It is an important reminder, though, in a media environment obsessed with democratic disarray, that Dem bumbling and cowardice is often matched and surpassed by the bumbling cowardice of the right. That's a good point. I'd like to layer that with another point, which is one that I made the other day, and I kind of always make in these situations, that even if you are giving up or strategically moving to one side, let's say in a shutdown fight, something like that, you've agreed to go ahead with this stuff. I say you run post-cloture time all the time anyway, because you never know when lightning might strike, right? So you just leave those things open. Like, for instance, John Fetterman went to the hospital. You lose your 60th vote temporarily, by the way, and maybe this ending the shutdown takes an extra week. This could have happened too.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
Alrighty, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. We were just reading through Noah Berlatsky's piece about, well, that's interesting. Just got a note from Scott that says we were off the air for under a minute at about 10:17. Maybe that's part of the continuing crash out of the internet servers in the area. You'll have to tune in to the podcast to get the missing minute. I wonder what was going on at 10:17. It was probably the best part of the show, too, with the funniest jokes. Anyway, we were reading Noah Berlatsky about the stunning incompetence of Mike Johnson, which really should be evident on its face anyway, but this is a very good and specific example that he thought he was going to have a big win somehow by delaying swearing in Adelita Grijalva. And it may have just been, I don't know what he thought he was going to get out of it, because eventually he's going to be brought in. Maybe he thought, like I was saying at the break, you drag things out if you can just to see what might happen in the meantime. And I suppose if you drag things out long enough and you were hoping that one of the 4 Republicans who signed the discharge petition would change their mind and remove it, that wouldn't have been a bad strategy by itself, but probably somebody should have said, yeah, if you're going to tie her swearing in to reopening the government, and you think you're going to win the shutdown fight by making Senate Dems cave and you want to capitalize on that, what you don't want to have is the Epstein story exploding at the same time. It's better to actually explode it earlier and let people get tired of it and then say, all right, fine, you think you got a win out of that? Well, we'll slap back now with a shutdown cave from the Senate Dems. That would have been the better timing, at least in hindsight. Anyway, but okay. So we were just pointing out that, yeah, Dem bumbling and cowardice, Noah says, is often matched and surpassed by the bumbling cowardice of the right. I can't remember exactly what it was that I was thinking about at the time, but when I was sort of watching the Senate Dem agreement to end the shutdown work its way through the process and commenting on the fact that nobody was enforcing the right to run the cloture clock on any of these things. And these guys speed ran 3 cloture votes in 24 hours, which you're not supposed to be able to do. But yeah, there were a couple of things that happened that I said, right. There was the ruling from the courts on SNAP. Would have been nice to have as information before the last 2 cloture votes where they could have put the brakes on this thing or renegotiated the deal possibly at some point. And of course, also of interest, if you were really looking to make it not work, John Fetterman had a health episode and ended up hospitalized. And if you needed exactly 60 votes to move this thing along and get past all 3 of those cloture votes, and your 60th vote is now in the hospital. Like you find out that there's 60 votes against this thing. You're resigned to it passing. But remember, the Senate is like a geriatrics club. You say you have the 60 votes that you need. Are you going to have them all week? Because I can make this thing last a week or 2 with cloture votes. Are you sure you can hold a coalition of 80-year-olds together 100% every time? Usually, yes, they have pretty good health care there, and they have a doctor on site. But sometimes no. Or somebody's plane is late or something, right? Okay, let's make you assemble. If you're going to have the 60-vote thing still stay on the books and you're not going to get rid of it, then make them produce the 60. And make them waste their time doing it. Anyway, they didn't do it, but I did say, there's still a possibility. I remember making some comment on Blue Sky around that time and just say, the capacity for Republicans to screw something up when they're being handed a victory is boundless. Try it. See what happens. Anyway, Noah goes on, making his point under the next section, the Wile E. Coyote of House procedure. Observing Johnson in recent months has been like watching an especially tedious and extended Roadrunner cartoon, where the coyote fashions intricate knots of congressional procedure in order to tie himself over the course of weeks to a giant stack of lit dynamite. This trap was set over the course of years. It started to take shape during the 2024 campaign when Trump promised to release files related to federal prosecutions of billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, accused with his colleague Ghislaine Maxwell of operating what kind of ring? A sex trafficking ring, of course, to abuse and exploit young women and children. Epstein died in prison in 2019, however it may have happened. Maxwell was convicted in 2021. Many on the right called for the release of the Epstein files because they believed they would implicate Democratic figures like former President Bill Clinton. And remember that Marjorie Taylor Greene, murdery traitor Greene, is breaking with President Trump over the release of the Epstein files, not because she thinks there's evidence that Trump is guilty of any of this stuff. Her original interest in doing it was just what Noah said. She thought it would implicate Democrats. She probably still does. She's just mad at him for not giving her evidence against Democrats. And basically says, I think I can hang on to MAGA voters and Q adjacent voters and other Republicans by insisting, why are you not giving me the evidence I need to implicate Democrats? I don't know. I'm not really sure. Anyway, to cater to them, Trump promised to release the files, but Trump himself was close friends with Epstein for years. He had, in fact, been accused by a woman of raping her at Epstein's home when she was 13 years old. The accuser in 2016 withdrew a lawsuit related to that allegation. Trump's complaint, but also my complaint about Trump's compliant, get it, Justice Department told him in May that his name was in the files. I mean, it's amazing that they had to, but he's very dumb and his brain is not good. Anyway, he and or his administration, what's the difference, unitary executive, subsequently decided not to release them. That seems suspicious for obvious reasons. Trump has done little to alleviate those suspicions. Instead, he has, in fact, I would say, he has continued to do everything in his power to prevent the release of the Epstein files, as has his chief stooge in Congress, Mike Johnson. So, not making anything better. Johnson refused bipartisan calls to bring a bill to the floor requiring the DOJ to release the files. So, in early September, conservative Republican Representative Thomas Massie filed a discharge petition to force a vote. The petition requires a majority of the House members to sign it. Every Democrat signed, and so surprisingly did rabid MAGA representatives Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and murdery Trader Green. Trump engaged in an active and successful lobbying effort to dissuade other Republicans, which is funny because, of course, now he is telling them, go ahead. In late September, though, Grijalva won her special election and promised to sign the discharge petition as her first act. Hers would have been the last vote needed to pass the petition, but the government shutdown began shortly thereafter, and Johnson responded by closing the House. No, not quite right. In an unprecedented abuse of power, he refused to swear Grijalva in for 7 weeks. That part can't object. The government shutdown began shortly thereafter, and Johnson responded by closing the House. It wasn't that he closed the House for lack of funds because of the shutdown. No, that's not what happens during a shutdown. Members of Congress are essential employees. Their staff gets furloughed very often. Sometimes key staffers are required to report to work. Sometimes unpaid, sometimes not. But the House doesn't shut down in a government shutdown, and it wasn't in response to the government shutdown. It was the cause of the government shutdown. I do remind you, the House left before the government shut down. They just didn't come back. And they didn't come back because they were looking to jam the Senate and make the Senate accept the House's CR package, which, by the way, even though they quote-unquote won the shutdown, that is not what happened. The Senate did not accept the House's version of things. They passed an amended version of it and handed it back to the House, and the House ended up swallowing the Senate version of things. But it was a process. But no, he didn't shut down. It's a minor point, but he didn't shut down the House in response to the government shutdown. He perpetuated the government shutdown by insisting that they leave and leaving the Senate with no choice but to take up the House bill, even if they were going to amend it. They had to start with that, although they probably would have had to start with that as a spending bill under the Constitution. Anyway, I don't know what he thought he was getting out of it, but he didn't want the House in town to negotiate with the Senate, so he sent them home. It wasn't because of the shutdown. It was to perpetuate the shutdown and to make reopening that much more difficult. Grijalva accurately characterized Johnson's actions as unconstitutional. That's true. And illegal. Well, she did say that, so that's factually so. She also said that she believes the delay was a tactic to delay the Epstein vote, which is almost certainly accurate. More, it seems that Johnson's abuse of power was undertaken at Trump's behest, given Trump's close attention to the discharge petition and Johnson's general eagerness to prostrate himself before the president. Trump and Johnson clearly are not tactical geniuses. Refusing to seat Grijalva ensured that a lot of shutdown coverage would center on Epstein and or the fact that the House was not in session and representatives were twiddling their thumbs while people's SNAP benefits were disrupted and air travel spiraled into chaos. All of this is part of why public opinion was so solidly against Republicans throughout. Worse than that for the Gop, though, was the fact that Johnson ensured that the end of the shutdown would ensure the passage of the discharge petition. Johnson had kept Grijalva out on the pretext that the House wasn't open, but to end the shutdown, the House had to open and vote. Grijalva had to be sworn in before any other business could occur. So Grijalva signed the discharge petition, and suddenly the big story was not that the Democrats had caved, but that the country and survivors were a step closer to seeing the Epstein files. That is a good point. They could have engineered it otherwise. He's not good enough at it or not brazen enough to do it, but probably better that they don't even try. But yes, this strategy meant, since they tied all these things together, even though they really they bore no relation to one another, and it wasn't the case that the House was closed because of the shutdown. It is the case that the House had to come back in order to end the shutdown because the Senate wasn't going to simply accept the House version of the bill. They were going to make changes. The House would have to come back, and that's the end of it. So you knew they were coming back. You should have just come back earlier, sworn her in, and been done with it. Next section, Trump will not stop punching himself in the face. And so you can check, by the way, if he would please punch himself in the face, I just want to just as a PR issue, I want to encourage yourself to like literally punch yourself in the face, but use the back of your hands. The makeup will rub off of your face and cover up your bruises. It will make the bruising worse, but the makeup will cover it all. It's a self-licking ice cream cone, I guess. Anyway, what do we mean by this? House Democrats helped compound the damage to the Gop by simultaneously releasing 20,000 documents from Epstein's estate. That was helpful. These included emails about Trump, which underline that the two had a long-time relationship based in part on their mutual pursuit of young women. In one email, Epstein claims he has pictures of Trump with, quote, girls in bikinis in my kitchen, unquote. I'm glad this came up. I was thinking about bringing it up the other day. I couldn't find the excuse to do it. It's not that important. I just wanted to point out, I think pictures, I mean, it had to happen a long time ago before. Obviously, this email was written before Epstein was dead. But I don't know that there was any point in the Trump career arc where he would have been seriously damaged by pictures with him with girls in bikinis. That part won't hurt. I mean, he's a beauty pageant guy. He's got girls in bikinis all the time. He kept a special room at Pervalago where they just kept a drawer full of bikinis that he would try to get models to change into. And he totally didn't have any surveillance cameras in there. I'm positive of it, sure. Anyway, but that was a big thing for him, like getting models and beautiful young women to visit him at Mar-a-Lago and go swimming. And then they said, I didn't bring a bathing suit. Don't worry, I have a whole bunch of dirty bikinis in this drawer. Put one on. Put on somebody else's underwear. It'll be great. You'll love it. And you know what? They mostly didn't do it. Anyway, pictures of girls with bikinis weren't going to do anything. You could try, well, they're very young. Yeah, but they got their bikinis on. But I mean, it's gross and he's a perverted old man. Yeah, I know. Well, you could add this layer. Well, these girls, this picture is being taken in Jeffrey Epstein's kitchen. Okay. I mean, Epstein is gross, and now we know who the girls are and why those girls are there. But this is a photo of Trump standing with girls who, I guess it is famously purported, were forced into sex acts with Epstein and or his friends. But this is a photo of them not doing that. So I don't know. But, you know, Epstein lived in his own world and he really thought everything he did was genius. And clearly, if nothing else, his emails have illustrated he's kind of an idiot and not actually very smart. And it was a great comparison, I thought, to Curtis Yarvin in the last couple of days. Again, nobody knows what either of these two, like with Bannon, no one knows what these three idiots do for a living, how they get money. And no one knows why anyone listens to anything they say. And they're pretty dumb when you get right down to it. It's very discouraging. It makes it hard to go to work. Anyway, Epstein says, I have pictures of Trump with girls in bikinis in my kitchen. Big effing deal. Like, by the way, your brother asked, does Putin have a picture of Trump blowing Bubba? Sorry, that's what the thing said. And yes, I found out later on, the big defense here is, I didn't mean Bill Clinton. I meant some other Bubba. That seems like he would be equally interested in not having that picture come forward. But if your brother knows about that one and asks, like, isn't that the one you want to offer up? Like the picture of the girls in bikinis in your kitchen. I mean, you still wouldn't get anywhere if the picture was in your bedroom or in your massage room. Probably, although that would have, I don't know, that one would have come across I guess worse than the kitchen, but not as bad as the other one that your brother mentioned, which might not be real, but why didn't his brother say that instead of not that, Bubba? The whole thing is crazy. I told you I felt like I was taking crazy pills. Back to the article, though. Trump, though, also ensured that the discharge petition would receive as much attention as possible by once again making high-profile efforts to stop it. Justice Department and FBI officials reportedly met with Boebert in an unsuccessful bid to get her to remove her name from the discharge petition. Trump also pressured Mace and insinuated that he might oppose her run in South Carolina for the governorship there. I'm restructuring that sentence in order to cover up my reading error. But, by the way, did we mention this? I think so. Marcy offered an interesting explanation, like why the meeting with Boebert was in the Situation Room, and the answer was to take away her electronic devices so that she couldn't record or tweet about the situation, which would have been interesting. By the way, but maybe that wouldn't happen because, as you know, the Trump administration does not take away anybody's electronic devices. Andrew Tate, here's your electronic devices back. Lauren Boebert, give me your phone. Women, give it up. Guys, here's your phone back in case you want to make a video of you beating any women. Anyway, Trump's tantrum continued into the weekend, though he suddenly reversed course Sunday night. This has got to be frustrating as hell for everybody else. And on Truth Social, encouraged House Republicans to vote in favor of releasing the files, a face-saving move since it was already clear the measure had the necessary votes. Maybe it wasn't frustrating. Maybe it was enormously welcome for Republicans who were sweating it. I should say that. Everything is counterintuitive in this administration. Well, then he went on a social media rant in which he called Marjorie Taylor Greene wacky and a lunatic and a traitor, no lies there, and said she's a disgrace to our great Republican Party. Greene responded by saying his post had made her a target for threats. Boo-hoo. So did, that's your stock and trade, though. Remember, everyone was pointing at the videos of her harassing David Hogue and my favorite, screaming at AOC through the mail slot in her locked door. Remember, she went to AOC's office before she was elected to Congress, maybe not even yet running for Congress. She was just a content creator on Facebook, Murdery Trader Greene was, and so threatened AOC's office staff that they locked the door against her, and she was forced, as though this was an option, to kneel down on the floor and scream insults through the mail slot in the office door. But now she's sad because she's the target for threats. Murdery Trader Greene. All right. Well, anyway, Greene responded that Trump made her a target for threats and added, it's astonishing really how hard he's fighting to stop the Epstein files from coming out that he actually goes to this level. It's very weird that she's actually insinuating that, like he's protecting himself when there's plenty of room here for her to MAGA through this and say, I don't think he's implicated, and I do think Democrats are, and I don't know why he's fighting it. Except that everyone would then say, I know why he's fighting it, because he's a pervert and he's in the files. What are you, an idiot? And then she would kind of be forced, I guess, to say yes. Anyway, continuing on, this kind of headline-grabbing bullying simply keeps the Epstein files in the news and emphasizes that Trump is afraid to release them. And anything that reminds people of the files or of Trump's relationship to them is bad for Trump. His net approval on the issue of releasing the Epstein files is minus 39. Only 45% of Republicans approve of his handling of the case. It's the one issue where the Republican-based voters are likely pressuring their reps to vote against Trump. As Republican Senator John Kennedy told CNN while criticizing the White House's approach to the files, I just don't think this issue is going to go away until it's addressed and answered to the American people's satisfaction. And that may be a trap in itself. There is no satisfying the people about that, but that's what he said. Where the Epstein fight goes from here, maybe that gets us around to the procedural discussion in a minute. I hope not. I hope it does, but I don't think so. We're going to run out of time. Johnson could have continued to stall and tried to push the vote on the Epstein files back. He didn't, presumably because his caucus it's a conference, not a caucus, and this is a commonwealth, not a state, wants to get the vote over with as quickly as possible so they can talk about literally anything else. Thomas Massie, hopes to get 290 votes, which would be enough to override a presidential veto. That would require around 76 Republican defections. And by the way, how many votes do you need to be what they call veto proof? You're not veto proof. You can still get vetoed. Then you got to override. That's a separate question. Very often people defect. But why? What is interesting? 290 votes. Why 290? That's 2/3 of the House. What else requires 290 votes? What other kind of procedure requires a 2/3 vote on the House floor? The answer is suspension of the rules. What did I tell you the whip notice said in my email? It said that the bill they'll be voting on, which is not Thomas Massey's, that's another issue. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, actually sponsored by Ro Khanna, who was a co-sponsor of Massey's resolution and underlying bill and discharge petition. He has his own bill. One of the few instances, one of the rare instances in which a Republican successfully gets his own bill to the floor and the House Republican Conference and House-controlled Rules Committee, House majority in the hands of the Republicans say, no, the bill we're bringing to the floor will be a Democratic bill, not a Republican one. Only in this situation. Never seen it done before. But again, listed on the schedule as a suspension bill, which means it will require how many votes to pass? Everyone remembers the number I just told you? 290. So that's an interesting way of wrapping up a bill in one, quickly. A suspension bill, don't forget, gets debated for only 40 minutes versus a full hour for Tom Massey. So 20 minutes, a 1/3 reduction in debate time on the House floor. That's kind of a win. And it makes it possible, by the way, for 70 or so Republicans to defect and then have the bill fail because it's being brought under suspension of the rules. Will it happen? I don't know. But that'd be an interesting engineering feat for them. No one has hard numbers, but current reporting suggests that a large number of Republicans, maybe more than 100, are in fact likely to vote for the release of the files later today. Don Bacon of Nebraska, one of the most centrist Gop House members, said he'll vote for it. So there you go. Only 75 to go. So has Rob Bresnahan, or is it Bresnahan? Bresnahan, who represents a contested Pennsylvania swing district. A landslide House vote in favor of releasing the files would not necessarily result in their release, though. There's a number of choke points, of course. The petition would need to follow the usual path to become law. The petition itself, of course, would not become law. Neither is the item discharged by the petition. That's a procedural issue I've explained to you before. That means that Senate leadership would not need to take it up, and Republican leaders John Thune and John Barrasso have indicated they're not interested in giving it a vote. Though if there's overwhelming majority in the House in favor of releasing the files, then there might be a lot of pressure on them to change their minds. I think they would. The Senate could also pass it with some sort of noxious amendment designed to kill it, forcing another vote in the House. And even if it survived that, it would still have to go to the president, who may veto it. The House and Senate would then have to muster a 2/3 vote to override him. And even then, Trump might still just refuse to release the files, and the whole thing would go to the courts, and who knows what would happen at that point. That's worth mentioning. It is still, in other words, likely to be a bitter slog for survivors, and the path to any kind of justice or accountability remains long and difficult. Trump's commitment to blocking release of the files is ugly. He's also very ugly. I'll point that out. It's also, as noted before, extremely unpopular, even within the GOP. Republican efforts to palliate the president on this issue have led them to place and then step on bizarre, easily avoidable political landmines. I was wondering if it was going to be landmines or rakes at the end of this. The issue has also split the GOP coalition, causing even very MAGA members to distance themselves from the president. The problem is compounded by the fact that there may well be extremely damaging information about Trump in the Epstein files. Trump has, after all, been held liable for sexual assault, accused of sexual assault by numerous women, and boasted on tape of sexually assaulting women. It's reasonable to suspect there may be more evidence or accusations of impropriety or crimes in the Epstein files. Last week, Democrats in the Senate pivoted from sweeping election victories to a shutdown surrender, enraging their base and ceding some of the momentum that had driven positive media coverage and midterm hopes. But at the same time, Republicans, led by Trump, engineered a sweeping self-destructive scandal, which seems likely to drag on for months and possibly, if Trump has his way, for years. Republican incompetence and cruelty and their choice of an amoral monster and adjudicated sexual abuser to lead them is not good news for anyone. It's worth remembering, though, that Democrats are not the only party with an uncanny aptitude for self-destruction. I don't know. Nice point. Well done. Well structured. Good way to end if I'm not going to get to the procedural back and forth on this thing. But it looks to me, for all the world, like they are scheduling a suspension vote. As I'll point out quickly, I hope in the end of this, it is not Thomas Massey's bill. And you may remember, I don't remember if I remember the number, but it was what? H-Res 185 was the rule that he was discharging. And they have discharged it, but the 7 days haven't elapsed yet, so they're not forced to consider his rule. Instead, they're bringing, and remember, H-Res 185 was the rule for consideration of HR, House of Representatives. The R for in H-Res, or the Res is resolution. This is just House of Representatives Bill 581 or something like that. It was the dyslexics problem. Instead, we have HR 4405, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, introduced by Representative Ro Khanna. When, I don't know, we could take a look at the thing and see the text of it. It's different, and we'll have to analyze the differences. There is a little bit of writing out there that we won't have time to get to that explains the differences between Ro Khanna's bill and Massey's. But I think, I don't know, it seemed to be, as I recall from my skimming of the materials, locked down pretty tight and has an additional mechanism that I think will prevent the House or Senate from burying all of this. Some trigger mechanisms that were missing from the Massey version of it, actually, that requires some activity when the bill is in fact transmitted to the Senate for their consideration, not just that it's passed the House. But I don't remember exactly what it was. But we'll be reviewing that tomorrow in an after-action report when we debate this or discuss this. We won't be debating much with Greg Dworkin tomorrow. All right. So anyway, there you have it. A suspension bill that requires, by the way, of course, no action whatsoever by the House Rules Committee, which may be why, though they were rumored to be taking up a rule for consideration of some Epstein bill, whether Khanna's or Massey's, they didn't, or at least they didn't schedule it. And the answer is because they're sending it to the floor as under suspension of the rules, which means they don't have to do anything. It means it can't be amended. It means it's only debated for 40 minutes and not an hour. It means it gives the House an opportunity to go on record with a veto-proof majority. And it means that 70 Republicans can vote for this thing and it can still fail. All opportunities for, I don't know, them ruining their reputations even further, I guess.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, that'll be a topic for tomorrow, of course. However, coming up next, speaking of topics for discussion, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy right here on Netroots Radio. Justice Putnam will take you through his collection of stories for the day, starting with, fresh off the heels of the Comey ruling, New York AG Tish James filed her own motion to dismiss. You should see what's going on in those cases. Lindsay Halligan, you're crazy, girl.